Delighted to be here to talk about the topic of cloud security. And to talk about cloud security, we need to understand what we mean by cloud. So it's always good to start with a definition. So I did a bit of searching for, well, define cloud. And this definition I found, which I thought was quite amusing. Anything that obscures, darkens something, causes gloom, trouble, suspicion, and disgrace. And I thought, yeah, that's kind of roughly how a lot of us feel. But the thing is, cloud, the reason that it is so ubiquitous now is because of its incredible power and utility. I mean, we talked a lot this morning, there's been references to generative AI. And that technology really wouldn't exist without being powered in the background by cloud. So then I thought, like, no presentation today is it's worth the salt without some reference or some use of generative AI. So I asked the AI to give me some pictures of people who are grappling with cloud security, challenged with cloud security, and this is what they came up with. So obviously it was quite upsetting I felt like it was looking at a reflection of myself, so that was a bit troubling. But I'm particularly worried about that guy in the bottom, the second from the right in the bottom. He's got some serious problems going on there. But that is the problem. The problem is that cloud has evolved and is continuing to evolve. Not everybody has the same level of understanding. And then as security professionals, then we have to figure out, well, what's our role in terms of securing that and trying to wrap our arms around it. So that's the purpose of this talk, is to try and help with that. And there's an opportunity for loads of puns, removing the fog of misunderstanding, demystifying cloud, etc. So what I thought I'd cover quickly, just talk about the trends in cloud, because you really need to understand cloud and the trends. And you also need to understand the threats around cloud. Then what's the tooling and the technology aspect, because that is a critical part by its sheer nature, because of its scale and size. Technology has to come into the picture with cloud security. But then there's also frameworks, because in effect, good cybersecurity controls and practices, many of those extend into cloud as well. And there's plenty of guidance out there about frameworks. So I'm going to cover a bit of that and then finish with some recommendations for you to take away. So starting with the cloud trends and the shift to cloud that is continuing, and as I think was mentioned earlier, it's no longer a prediction, we're already there. But it's complicated because cloud continues to evolve, it is multifaceted, and if you ask someone about cloud and say define it, they'll give you probably a different definition to your own understanding. It means different things to different people, and it's definitely not uniformly understood. And really, to understand it, there is a kind of degree of technical understanding that is needed, because there's so much underneath it all. And it's not just about production. It's not just about cloud from an operational point of view, because cloud is really part of that whole development into operations life cycle, going from development securely into the cloud as well. And all of those factors have to be considered. And just because it's everywhere now, it's all around us. We're using it every day in the applications. Some of us barely log into our enterprise networks anymore. We're just using cloud applications all the time. But just because it's pervasive doesn't mean we actually understand it. It's because you've got SaaS applications, cloud connected systems, all these applications talking to one another over the cloud using APIs, and then also the whole development side as well. But to kind of get cloud security right, we must understand cloud itself. So, but definitions sometimes don't help. Like, if you look at Gartner, cloud computing is a style of computing in which scalable and elastic IT-enabled capabilities are delivered as a service using internet technologies. Yeah, you can get your head around that. It makes logical sense. But what do you actually do with that from a security point of view? So you do need to break it down a little bit. And even like other definitions aren't perfect, but sometimes you can think of cloud as that kind of that set of infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service. So now you're starting to break it down and actually think about the different aspects of cloud and the different elements you're going to have to consider in your security strategy. The thing about cloud security is a bit of a misnomer now, I believe, in my humble opinion, because cloud is now integral to IT. It's not separate. It's not like I've got all my IT and my security, oh, and I've got this other cloud thing over here, and now I must think about what is my cloud security bit on the side. You could ask the question, does cloud equal not on-prem? That's a kind of one way of thinking about it. A lot of people do that. But it's not strictly true, because it goes back to that definition piece. Because what about private cloud? So private cloud computing is a form of computing used by one organization, ensured that it's isolated from everybody else. But really, today's on-prem is actually private cloud in most cases, providing compute and applications remotely to all of those hybrid and remote working employees that you have. So cloud really, from a security point of view, cloud, I think you can think about it referring more to the means of access to a central, scalable resources, rather than that is necessarily owned by a public cloud provider versus a private cloud provider. So the key message there being cloud security is effectively IT security. So if you add in public cloud, private cloud, SaaS, it's effectively the majority of IT in the modern age. Now, if you look at the stats, cloud spending is going to overtake traditional spending within 2 years. It's growing at 20% compound annual growth rate. However, a couple of observations from this. One is the traditional also includes all of that private cloud infrastructure. So in reality, we're already there when you add them all together. Also, interesting of note here, you don't see the traditional declining commensurate with the growth in cloud. So the much vaunted early kind of cost savings of cloud and how it's going to replace and optimize traditional spending, I think we all realize now that that's not necessarily the case. So in totality, that spend is increasing, but also the fact that the traditional spend, i.e. that on-prem piece or that private cloud piece, is also growing as well, albeit not as aggressively. 65% of organizations already heavy users of cloud, and others moderate to light. So we're all there, just to differing degrees is really the message. And a key aspect of cloud security is the nature of, like, is it a single cloud? Is it public? Is it private? 87% of organizations are now multi-cloud. So they're not just going with one cloud provider for a variety of reasons. It's for resilience. It's for commercial reasons. It's for a whole range of reasons. Organizations grow up their cloud infrastructure and their cloud estate in lots of myriad ways. So 80% multi-cloud, 72% hybrid public and private. So we're getting into this complex world, this simplification of just moving everything to the cloud. Well, unfortunately, it's not just one cloud. It's your private in conjunction with your public, in conjunction potentially with multiple public clouds. And that's the beast we have to try and secure. By 2025, 80% of enterprises will have adopted multiple public cloud infrastructure as a service offerings. So it's growing, and that's the world we're in right now. Then if you look at the SaaS side, the use of SaaS applications within enterprises has grown 16-fold since 2015. And now the average organization uses 130 SaaS applications, of which IT is typically aware of about a third of those. So that's quite a shocking statistic in terms of all this migration of applications to SaaS, but yet IT and commensurate security controls around that. What are we doing with that? Because that's a huge opportunity for data leakage, for misuse, and identities being compromised and whatnot. and all the downside effects of that. And that's not going to change. That's only going in one direction. So by 2026, 80% of organizations will probably have about 72% of their applications. Roughly almost 3/4 of applications will be SaaS-based. And then there'll be, you'll have the vanguard SaaS-powered workplaces who will be all SaaS-based. And even the more traditional, the organizations that really want to, kind of keep their arms around everything, which is probably the lower 10%, still are going to be dragged into, probably about, in the region of 40% SaaS application usage. So that is another aspect of IT and IT security that organizations need to consider. So that just gives a landscape of those trends and where we're going. And from a threat perspective then, what are we seeing? So the good news is maybe we can relax, because in the latest report, cloud security is no longer the top cloud challenge. So all the reports for the last 10 years or so, polling organizations about moving to the cloud, what was their top concern? Security, 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 security. So the latest report doesn't have cloud security at the top anymore. So does that mean we can all relax and take a well-earned vacation? Unfortunately not. Maybe don't do that just yet, because actually managing cloud spend has risen to the top. It's number one now for organizations. And when you think about it, it's not actually surprising. With all this massive shift to the cloud, most organizations using cloud, using multiple clouds, suddenly the economics of all of that, traditional spend not actually declining in line with that, as we've all been promised up front. So managing cloud spend is becoming a big issue. But security is not far behind. It's still a major concern for the vast majority of organizations who are grappling with moving to cloud. So unfortunately, we can't fully relax just yet. And the problem with cloud is it vastly increases the attack surface, because the very benefits of cloud, its ubiquitous accessibility, its almost near infinite scalability, is also the reason why it becomes a significant attack surface for an organization. So here's some examples of some breaches just in the last 12 months or so. And even just one example, the Shanghai police had the data of 1 billion citizens stolen, just due to a cloud management console on the internet being left open. So can you imagine, in the past that just wasn't possible, because that scalability, that accessibility just wasn't there. But now the sheer power of the cloud is also providing the vehicle by which the threat actors can exploit those situations. Who has heard of Bill Clinton? Nobody? Okay. Bill was famous for saying during elections, that it's the economy stupid, and it was his simple mantra: get the economy right and everything else will fall into place. Well, if Bill was in charge of cloud security, he would say it's the configuration stupid. And the reason is not because he didn't mean that you didn't have to worry about anything else except the economy. Obviously you have to worry about lots of other things, but it was a huge, huge factor, one of the main factors in terms of winning elections and being a popular president. Well, it's the same in cloud security. It's around the configuration. It is expected that through 2025, over 99% of breaches in the cloud will have a root cause in misconfiguration by the customer, not by the cloud provider or by some mistake. So that means it's really important to understand that shared responsibility model that you have with cloud, where the provider takes certain responsibilities, and then you, as the customer, the organization using that cloud service, takes the other responsibility. That's the area within which most of the issues are arising. It's within the responsibility of the customer, not the provider. And depending on whether it's infrastructure, PaaS, or SaaS, you have more responsibilities. Obviously, if you're renting infrastructure as a service, then you have to worry about the virtual network, the OS, the middleware, the runtime, the applications, etc. Go into the far side, into the SaaS side of the picture. You think that, okay, well, SaaS, so therefore the provider takes care of everything. Well, they do take care of a lot more, but the data, the people, the credentials, the logging in, what you're sharing there, it's still your responsibility. And unfortunately, that's where actually the worst security vulnerabilities are. You saw on that previous slide, many of the breaches that were mentioned were due to storage being misconfigured, AWS buckets, Azure blobs, things like that. Those are all customer misconfigurations. There was just a standard configuration there. Maybe it was misconfigured, or maybe they didn't properly lock it down, and it became available and easily accessible by some other party. Then if you look at other research, the Cloud Computing Alliance is one of the top bodies thinking about and publishing content and leadership on cloud security. And they published last year their Pandemic 11, the top cloud threats that they have experienced and seen in the market, particularly due to the likes of COVID and people working remotely, and how those things were exploited by people and organizations using cloud. And the key themes were, again, misconfiguration, accidents, mistakes, the management of identities, credentials, keys and accounts, insecure interfaces, and don't forget APIs. Actually, most of the interactions with cloud systems is over APIs, not over user interfaces. So again, a critical vector for security, along with a number of other details like, insecure development, vulnerabilities, and even just not having a good security architecture and strategy for the cloud. When you look on the SaaS side, security still is the top concern for organizations managing SaaS. More so than managing the license costs of SaaS or controlling the sprawl, which are also key issues. Because we've seen the sprawl, we've seen the average 130 SaaS applications across your organization, of which IT know about 30%. But securing SaaS apps, and again, the top themes around these threats are around just new unauthorized SaaS applications just popping up around the business, being used, not being controlled, users misusing or violating policies and sharing sensitive data publicly through these applications. So that was a bit of a navigation through some of those threats, and now looking at the tooling and the landscape around what help is out there to help secure some of this stuff. And unfortunately, it's when I talked earlier about the fact that it's you need some level of technical understanding to understand cloud security. It's a veritable alphabet soup of acronyms, terminology, that you really have to be almost deep in it to understand it. So it is confusing, and that's probably the reason why cloud security tools are on the rise. There's been a fourfold increase in cloud security product investment in the last couple of years. It's where all the focus of attention is, because it is known that's where all the problems are. Well, many of the problems are in security. And interestingly, for organizations looking at multi-cloud tools, across all organizations, security tools are the leading tools that organizations are investing in, just slightly ahead of cost optimization, which is interesting because the top challenge we just talked about was actually cost. If you look at large enterprises, security, 63% of large enterprises are investing in multi-cloud security tools. And it's not surprising, given we've seen the fact that it's not just about single cloud anymore, it's about public, private, hybrid, and multiple public clouds. And whilst many of the public cloud providers are moving towards being able to support other cloud providers, you look at Microsoft, they now have services and products that can extend into Azure and GCP, for example. but there is still a place for an ability to have good security controls that can be uniform across multiple clouds. So how do we make sense of all this tooling, this investment? And again, you can get buried in acronyms and terminology and not really understand it. So what I've tried to do is clear the fog of misunderstanding, which is to say, well, you can actually boil it down, I believe, into you got to secure access to the cloud. Okay, it's not just about securing the cloud, but who's getting into it and what they're getting into it and what they're getting out of it. So security access to the cloud. Secure the configuration of the cloud. It's the configuration stupid, as Bill would say. Secure the workloads running in the cloud. That extends to both protection, and so it's no longer just an endpoint running on Windows or Linux or Mac. It's a container. It's Kubernetes orchestration. It's serverless workloads and all ethereal types of workloads going on in there. So you've got to secure that configuration. The workloads, and then finally, that whole cycle now, the cloud has enabled very rapid development and deployment of applications, and it's a lot of infrastructure now is being deployed as code. It's no longer enough just to try and secure things after they've been gone into production. You need to go shift left in that cycle and secure the development so that before stuff gets into the cloud, that it's already been secured to the maximum possibility. So those are the four kind of key areas that I just want to mention. When you look at cloud access, if you think about it, the internet is just a big cloud. Okay, it's not our cloud, but we've got employees, we've got partners, we've got people going up on the internet, they're doing stuff there, they're accessing effectively web applications or websites or web applications. There's a blurred line between those things now. Those are things you don't own, you don't rent them, you don't have any commercial relationship with those things, but you need to secure that access. You need to make sure it's a secure channel. Traditionally, we've done that with secure web gateways. You've got to secure what you rent. So if you think about SaaS applications, you're really renting those applications. You don't own them. Traditionally, we've done that with the likes of cloud access security brokers that can provide that level of security around accessing all those SaaS applications. And then you've got accessing what you do own, whether it's in public cloud or in your data centers. Then you need to protect that access as well. Historically, we've done a lot of that with VPNs, private network access. That's evolving now into zero trust type of network access. There's an evolution of that. There's an evolution here because of all the advent of remote and hybrid working. Then some of the old architectures, a lot of point products in different places, many of them on-premise and but your workers aren't on-premise, so how do you deal with all of that? So the modern enterprise architectures has really moved now towards security service edge. So this enabling the secure work from anywhere, and that kind of brings together that web access, that SaaS app access, and that zero trust access into an integrated cloud-based system that's very flexible, very scalable, and it allows your workers to access the resources they need from anywhere, no matter if they're in the public internet, if they're SaaS applications you're using, or if they're in your private environment. And actually, SSE is recommended as a starting point for zero trust and for SASE, which then if you couple in the evolution away from traditional networks and MPLS towards more software-defined networking, when you marry that software-defined networking with secure service edge, you've got what the industry now is calling SASE, or Secure Access Service Edge, which is really a modern architecture for both networking and for securing your environment for your organization. In terms of securing cloud configuration, which is next, if you look at IaaS and PaaS, I talked earlier about the need to secure configuration. So cloud security posture management, absolutely crucial. Get that visibility. If you think about all those workloads, all those assets, all those accounts accessing those systems, what do you actually have? The theme of today is visibility. What this gives you is visibility. You can actually see what you have. Is it configured correctly? If not, why not? Is it complying with your policies? What are your policies? Etc. So the visibility, the security, the compliance, and crucially the infrastructure as code scanning, which I said earlier, it's too late to be deploying your infrastructure as code and then trying to detect it later on, because in those few hours, few days, whatever the time may be, that could have been the time that a threat actor has exploited that vulnerability. Policies and frameworks and all good stuff. And that has extended out into the likes of, Kubernetes now, the most popular, really, the containerization orchestration solution out there. And, so there's similar tools have evolved for doing that across Kubernetes. And also, if you think about your entitlements of your identities, like who can do what in the cloud and what permissions and privileges they have, has given rise to a lot of investment and solutions around cloud identity entitlements management. And if your head is spinning, well, so is mine, because all of these terms get a bit confusing. So the good news is there's a lot of convergence happening in this space, bringing all together to help with that, both in terms of the native providers and third-party providers as well. And those provide multi-cloud support, detection and visibility, alerting and remediation, all brought together. On the SaaS side of the house, you've got a kind of an equivalent of that, which is your SaaS security posture management. So it's an emerging category, but again, it is something that can really help you with your configuration around SaaS applications that you're using. And again, there's a good news that there is also convergence happening in two areas. Some of them are merging into the SSE side they talked about, which is again is a happy convergence because it means it's one less thing to have to think about. And also there's an emergence of SaaS management platforms as well to help with the administration of all those SaaS applications. And they can also help with the SaaS security posture management as well. In terms of securing cloud workloads, so this is more about the runtime side of things. So you've got all these workloads, you've got these containers and applications, and they can be quite ethereal. They can start up, they can close down. So this is more about the workload, protecting server workloads in hybrid and cloud environments, giving you the visibility and control. It doesn't matter if it's a physical machine, a virtual machine, container, or a serverless workload. It really gets you into that space of securing those workloads. And it's monitoring those, and it's also providing visibility, which is, again, the theme of today, into what's actually happening at runtime, and provides things like intrusion protection and helping with malware protection as well. And I talked earlier about cloud configuration security. Well, good news is these areas are converging as well for a couple of reasons. We're all fed up with too many point products, and also these products they complement one another. They're greater than the sum of the parts when they work in harmony, because now the workload protection has the context of the configuration when they're working together. And then finally, secure cloud app development. So that's just shifting left in the development cycle, getting your application developers to really, if you like, do the right thing, but not creating friction for them, but at least highlighting those security issues that are developing the code earlier in the life cycle. So how do we bring this all together then? Well, there's too many tools, as I said. Most organizations are pushing code at least weekly. 48% of organizations are actually pushing code daily, which is pretty staggering, having worked in software development in the past. Most orgs actually struggle to figure out what tools to use in this space, and they're worried that there's blind spots occurring between the tool sets as well. So now the good news is you can forget everything I just said, because there's a new category come together, cloud native application protection, that brings together that configuration security, the runtime security, and the cloud configuration in that full life cycle, and also provides that interface into the detection and response as well, so that you now have the control, you're locking down your configuration, you're detecting things at runtime, and you're alerting, and you're pushing left to make sure that very few security issues get into the deployment in the first place. So yeah, by 2025, 60% of enterprises will, if they do have, these different tool sets, they will consolidate, and most of cloud security posture management is going to be integrated into CNAP purchases by 2025. And If you look in cloud security investment, it's all in this area as well. So this is definitely, and we see it every day, talking to vendors and talking to the people out there and the research houses. And this is the big hot area in terms of cloud security, is in CNAP, which is to some extent an amalgamation of these different areas. Two more slides and then we'll open for questions. So I did say it's not all about the technology. So general security frameworks are equally applicable to the cloud, and which ones you use depends on your starting point. So if you're using existing frameworks, for example, ISO 27000, it has a guidance for how to apply that to the cloud with 2717. CIS Top 18 Controls has a cloud companion guide, and even the NIST framework and Cyber Essentials have good references to cloud security. In the public sector, there are government-backed frameworks. We've got the security baseline standards for the public sector in Ireland, and we've got the NCSE published an Office 365 secure configuration framework for anybody in the Microsoft world. And in the UK, we've got some equivalent guidance as well in cloud. So particularly public sector, but not just public sector, some useful guidance there. If you're a cloud provider, if you're native in the cloud, or you're a SaaS provider yourself, then the Cloud Security Alliance has a very rigorous controls matrix. And then if you're a smaller organization or want to go lightweight, there's also some lightweight frameworks available as well. And then even the CSPs themselves, like the Azure and AWS, have their well-architected framework, and GCP, Google Cloud Framework, some good guidance in there about how to apply security, and not just security, in your architecture in the cloud. So in summary, what I would say is cloud security is IT security. Make sure you assess, define your scope, and leave it to third-party expertise. If you don't know where you are, get visibility, get a cloud, request a cloud security assessment to baseline where you are. Think about the scope. Think about the controls framework and test it regularly. So pen testing is equally applicable to the cloud, not just your on-prem or your private network. And consider all aspects, as I've talked about, the public, private, SSE, get a grip on SaaS, and all those good things. So that's it. I just want to throw it up, but I just want to say was that thanks for listening, and I hope you look a little bit more like these guys than the guys at the start. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I look like that one.